A few weeks ago, we ended our fall marriage class. And this class is aimed at couples that need to rebuild their marriage. And it contains an hour presentation and then an hour of small group discussion. And we have multiple small groups and different facilitators that lead the different groups. But I asked one couple what they liked about the class. And they said, it feels just so good to know that we aren't alone. I mean, other couples struggle with the same things that we do. And before class, sometimes I wondered if we were the only ones. And I have heard this over and over again, and it's easy to think that you're the only couple that struggles in their marriage. And having a safe place to be honest about the struggles is very, very healing. It's the small groups can be very healing, and that's one of their big advantages. But the catch is that you need to create an atmosphere that's safe, that allows people to be transparent, that's open, and it's non-judgmental. So here are 10 tips for your marriage small group. Tip number 1 is to be transparent. The group leader sets the tone for open dialogue, and it helps if you're open about your own struggles with your marriage. And if you aren't open and transparent, the participants are going to find it more difficult to do so. So Michelle and I always start out a group by talking about our own marriage struggles, and we want to make it okay to be struggling and to be honest about this. And if you can do this, it reduces the fear that someone's going to be judged for having marriage problems, and it reduces the shame, and it helps to set a great atmosphere. So one time, Michelle and I finished giving our opening talk in a class, and where we go into some of our own struggles and what's happened in the past. And a gentleman stopped me after the class, and he explained he didn't know what this class was going to be like, and he didn't go to our church. But he decided he'd come without his wife and check it out. And if it appeared to be judgy or preachy, he wouldn't be back. Well, he ended up returning with his wife for the rest of the class, and he appreciated that we did not take a judgmental tone. Tip number 2 is to create safety. So we start a group by talking about rules of confidentiality. This is meant to be a safe place to be real, and what happens in the group stays in the group. So we talk to small groups about how rare it is to be open with others that may be struggling. I mean, where else do you get a chance to do this? And I often say something like, where else do you get to go and be honest about what you're struggling with? I've noticed that if couples don't feel safe, they won't open up. And honestly, sometimes it takes a few sessions to develop that trust so that they'll feel comfortable. So I always recognize and thank people when they're open and honest, especially when it's a first time. Eventually, this can become the atmosphere of the group. Tip number 3, expect emotions. Don't be surprised if someone is emotional. Opening up to someone can be a difficult experience. Marriage relationships can be very personal, and it's not uncommon for someone to express anger, sadness, bitterness, for them to cry, for them to lash out. And I always validate their emotions and just thank them for being honest, because the emotions are real. So we always have tissue available because oftentimes there's tears. Tip number 4, be very, very slow in offering advice. This is one of the top challenges for mentors, but it's far better for someone to come to their own conclusions than being told what to do. And advice at the wrong time is not only not helpful, it can come across as judgmental, and it can turn people away. So be very slow in offering advice. Tip 5, validate feelings. You lead by example. When someone expresses feelings, be sure to validate them. I'll say something like, wow, that sounds like it was very frustrating. Is that right? And I want them to open up. And when you validate their feelings, they're more likely to be more open. Tip 6, be patient with poor speaker and listener skills. It's really normal for couples to not be very good at following good speaker or listener skills. And they might talk about their issues and complaints about their partner. Often there's a great deal of blame. So I'll set up a group rule early on to only speak for yourself. And we ask them to use I statements. And honestly, this is tough for some people. But be patient and compassionate with them. It's okay. They're not going to get it right. And we'll wait until we've taught concepts on validation before we become more directive. Tip number 7, focus the group on relationship struggles. So if you have a mixed group of happily married couples and struggling couples, it's easy for the struggling couples to feel embarrassed or ashamed. And sometimes in this type of group, the healthier couples will dominate the conversation in the group, won't be honest. So, the healthy couples will explain how they might have had, just a very surface fight, and it sounds very easy. But if you're struggling with an affair, that doesn't always, validate that you're really going through some big issues. So explain that your issue is in a safe, or your interest is in a safe environment, and that you want honest healing to come from the group. So it's okay to share your struggles because we all have them. Tip number 8, marriage problems are normal. None of us get a manual on how to be married, and almost a third of married couples are struggling in their relationship. So things like anger, resentment, disconnection, and even affairs are very common issues, and I'm never surprised when I hear them. So I explain these are very normal, and it's easy to be embarrassed or ashamed when you have problems. But healing comes when we start to be honest with ourselves and with others. Tip number 9, focus on goals. Some couples are going to have a specific purpose for attending, and you can ask couples if there's something specific that they want to achieve. So they may or may not have a good idea what that is. And then I'll always write down what their goal is, and I'll keep track of it. And I use that then to remind the couple on improvements they'd like to achieve. For example, someone may want to work on their communication and conflict management. So then when we get into topics such as validation, we link it back to how it's going to help their goal of better communication. And the final tip number 10, is focus on marriage education. Mentors aren't necessarily therapists. And if you're not a professional counselor, you can still be very effective. Your role is marriage education, and you are coaching the couples on how to apply key concepts in having a healthy marriage. And your job is to help them to apply those concepts. So when in doubt, stick to the key concepts. Well, I hope these 10 tips have been helpful for you. Love to hear from you. If you have more tips that you found to be helpful, love to be able to get that and share that with others.